The summer of 2006, a trading algorithm called Borg, written by Stephen Swanson, caused a 6% collapse in the stock market. Stephen's net profit for the day was $300,000. In 2010, Singh Sarao applied an ingenious line of code and a layering strategy, which led to a halt of trading on Wall Street. In just 1 hour, with his algorithm, Sarao earned $800,000. Now you can create your own trading algorithm, your own IQ robot, without writing a single line of code. It is only necessary to specify the conditions under which your robot will make trades. Select your capital management strategy and test it on historical quotes to know how profitable your strategy is. Also, algorithms made by other traders will be available for you. All robots are already available in the system and are absolutely free. You have the ability to see statistics of the most successful robots, run them on your account, and automate your trading by basing on mathematical calculations. At present, 95% of successful deals in the market are made with trading algorithms or by robots. IQ Robots. Automate your profits. Create a robot that will open against the direction of the next to last candle, if the last candle was a doji. To create the robot, click Create a new robot. In the window that opens, enter a name for the robot and click Create. You can see that the designer already has two starting blocks, on candle and on tick. This strategy is based on candles, so we'll use the on candle block. However, the on candle block only gets information about the last candle, while we need the last two. Go to Tools, Information, and find the Candlestick Data block. Then drag it to the designer. In the parameters, set the candle period to work with. Let's set 30 seconds and make this a global parameter. We'll use the Transform block, which lets you get specific data from complex structures to get information about the last two candles. To do this, connect this block to the Candle Info block. In the parameters, enter comma-separated numbers of the desired candles, the first one and the second one. Now use two more transform blocks to get information about the closing price and opening price from these candles. Establish connections between the blocks, open the settings, and select the desired values in the drop-down list, the opening price and closing price. Now, use an if block to check whether the last candle was a doji and what color the next to last candle was, bull or bear, so red or green. In the if block, compare the value of the closing price and the opening price for our candles. Add if blocks. Click the button for comparing the two input values and set connections between the blocks. If the candle was a doji, its opening price should be equal to its closing price. So in this case, the information goes to an equal connector in the if block. In the same way, if the closing price is more or less than the opening price, the information goes to the less than and greater than signs. Now add two blocks for checking the data. The block is called Data Validation. In our case, it will give us data only if two conditions are met at once. The last candle was a doji. The next to last candle was a bull or bear. Set the connections. The last candle was a doji, and the next to last was a bear. And the same for the second block. Only the next to last candle was a bull. Now add a block that generates a signal. It's called Create a Signal. If the last candle was a doji and the next to last was a bear, we make a call signal. Similarly, if the last candle was a doji and the next to last candle was a bull, we make a put signal. Now add the Filter EMA Up and Filter EMA Down blocks. These blocks allow the signal to be passed on only if the EMA indicator was rising for an upward signal or falling for a downward signal. Let's set the indicator period to 20. These blocks are located in Strategies, Filters, and called Upward EMA and Downward EMA. In the parameters, set a value of 20. Then, use the Union blocks to combine the signals into a single branch. The block is located under Tools, Logical, and it's called Data Integration. Next, you need a block that checks the profit percentage for the asset and only allows data to pass further if this percentage is higher than the value specified in the block. This block is located under Strategies, Filters, and it's called Minimum Profit Percentage. In our case, the profit percentage for the asset that the robot is trading must be higher than 80%. Since the robot will be using the martingale strategy, add this block to the designer and set the value to 5 in the parameters. This number defines how much the profit percentage for a new transaction will cover previous losses. And add the Open Trade block at the end. This is the one that sends the request to complete a transaction. In other words, without this block, the robot can't trade, so it will only generate signals according to the principle described earlier. Save your work and test it on historical data. We'll use the wizard to create a simple robot that will use available strategies and signals. In the wizard, you can see a box for entering the name of the robot and 2 options. Select a ready-made strategy or create your own. First, let's look at selecting one of the ready-made strategies. Give your new robot a name and select a strategy, such as Bollinger Bands. Read the strategy description, then select it and go to the next step. Now set trading preferences for the robot. In particular, which type of account will be used for trading, a practice one or a real one? The asset the robot will be trading. You can have several of these, so let's choose 2. Euro US dollar and US dollar Japanese yen. Next, enter the initial amount of the transaction. Since this strategy uses the martingale principle, this amount can be increased after a loss. Let's set the value equal to 1. In the box below it, enter the amount allocated for trading. This is the maximum amount of funds that the robot can use for transactions. The higher this value is, the more unsuccessful transactions in a row your robot can handle and give you a profit. You can also make additional settings that will disable the robot if one of the following events occurs. Profit taking. Enter the amount that you want the robot to earn and then stop. Let's say 50. Loss limit. Here, you should enter the amount that the robot can lose in unprofitable transactions. Let's set 500. The limitation of losses in a row. Let's leave it empty since the martingale strategy will always cover a loss to break even or take a profit. Moving on to the next step. Now we can test the created strategy on historical data. Choose an asset from one of the ones we specified in the previous step, Euro US dollar or US dollar Japanese yen. We'll set the time period to 24 hours. You can change the amount allocated for trading and the transaction amount, but the values are taken from the previous step, so you don't need to change them as long as you are happy with everything. Click Test. If you are satisfied with the efficiency, percentage of profitable and unprofitable trades, profit, and all the other results, go to the next step. Here you set the publication options, the name and description. Your robot is ready to go. Run it on your account. Now let's try making a standard strategy more complex by adding custom signals to it. To do this, go back to the wizard window, enter a name for the new robot, and choose the Create Your Own Strategy tab. read the description and click Create Strategy. Here you will see a box for creating the robot, with signals for indicators and filters to the right. Let's create a robot that will start transactions if there were signals from both the Bollinger Indicator and in the direction of the last candle simultaneously. To do this, in the right-hand menu, click the Bollinger Indicator and drag the desired signal from the drop-down list to the box in the wizard. In the same way, find the signal in the direction of the last candle in the Candles section and drag it under the Bollinger block. You can create another additional signal that will search for entry points concurrently with the first one. It will be based on the signal from the MACD indicator and the signal in the direction of the last candle. Let's also add another filter which will not allow you to open a transaction if the profit percentage on the asset is below a certain value. This section is on the Filters, Open a Position tab. Drag it into the designer. Open the settings and specify a value, for instance, 75. Now go to the next step. Here, you need to select one of the money management strategies. Let's choose Fixed Amount. Select it and move on. Similar to what we have already done with the ready-made strategy, set options for the trading robot and go to the next step. Now we can test the robot on historical data. The robot didn't turn out to be very successful. Let's try changing the money management strategy to Martingale. Go back to step 1.2 and change the money management strategy to Martingale. At the bottom, set the parameter that is responsible for what percentage of profit covers losses in all the previous unsuccessful transactions. Let's set it to 5%. Once again, go to the testing step. This result is satisfactory, so continue to the publication settings. Give the robot a description and launch it on your account. We'll create a robot that will trade based on data from the RSI indicator. The robot will search for moments when the RSI is in the overbought or oversold area during the last 3 candles, and the last value of this indicator has started moving backwards. To create the robot, click Create New Robot. Enter a name for the robot and click Create. There are already 2 starting blocks here, On Candle and On Tick. We need the On Candle block, since the robot will be using candles for generating signals and opening trades. Candles are received for all time periods, so you have to filter out the candles for just the period you need. Use the Filter Candle block to do this. It is located under Strategies, Standard Blocks, and it's called Candlestick Filter. Add it to the designer and set a connection between the blocks. In the settings, set the period to 1 minute and make this parameter global. Then add the RSI block and set a connection between the blocks. In the parameters for the RSI indicator, leave the default value set to 12 and make this parameter global as well. Next, use the Transform block to get the last 3 RSI values, which we need in order to set the conditions for generating signals for trading. Set a connection between the blocks. In the parameters, specify which indicator values you need and separate them with commas, first, second, and third. Then, add 2 const blocks that you will use for setting the overbought and oversold levels for the RSI indicator. The data type for these parameters will be real number, and the values will be 70 and 30, respectively. Make these parameters global. Now, in order to check the conditions for generating signals, you need to add 3 if blocks for each signal. You will use them to check where the indicator line was during the last 3 candles, above or below the overbought or oversold levels. Add one more if block in order to check whether the direction of the indicator line changed. We are adding a total of 7 if blocks. In order to check 2 input values in an if block, you need to add a second entry connector. Now we can check whether the indicator line was above the overbought level. We'll check the last, next to last, and the third value of the indicator. Then, we'll check whether the direction of the indicator's movement has changed. And we'll check whether the indicator line is below the oversold level. Now, we need to make sure that all the conditions were met. Use the data validation block for this. In the block parameters, enter the value 4. This means that we will check 4 conditions and set the corresponding connections from if blocks. The last 3 RSI values were above the overbought level, and the current value is less than the previous one. The same applies to the second signal. The current value must become greater than the previous one, and the 3 last ones must be less than the oversold level. Now, let's make it possible to set the expiration time manually and change this parameter externally. To do this, add another constant block, where we can set the corresponding expiration index. In the parameters, select the integer data type, set the value to 1, and make this parameter global. Use the Create Signal blocks to generate higher and lower signals. Create connections between the ISET and Create Signal blocks. For the first block, the signal is put. For the second one, the signal is call. In the expiration time parameter, make the Add Input Connector button active. After this, the block gets another input connector, which you give the value from the constant block that corresponds to the expiration time. Combine the signals in a single branch using the union block called Data Integration. It outputs what it received on at least one of the connectors. If data was received by both input connectors simultaneously, the first one is used. Since we decided to use the martingale strategy, add this block, which is located under Strategies, Standard Blocks. Establish the connection and set the value to 10 in the block parameters. This parameter sets how much the profit from the last trade will cover previous losses. Add another block that will let the robot open a trade only when the profit percentage for an asset is greater than a specific value, such as 80%. This block is located under Strategies, Filters, and is called Minimum Profit Percentage. And the last step for creating the robot is adding a block that will open a trade. It is located under Tools, Trading, and is called Open a Position. Now, save the robot by clicking Save in the upper left corner. The next step is to test the robot on different currency pairs with different parameters. Choose the most optimal and profitable variation and launch it. Automating trading by creating a robot based on signals from the moving average indicator. Create a robot by clicking Create a new robot. In the window that opens, enter a name for the robot and click Create. Then you'll see the designer. There are already two starting blocks in the designer, OnCandle and OnTick. You need to use the OnCandle block, since the robot will be using candles for generating signals and opening positions. You need to filter out candles for just the desired period. You can do this using the Filter Candle block, which is located under Strategies, Standard Blocks. It's called Candlestick Filter. Set a connection from the OnCandle block to the Filter Candle block. In the parameters, set the period to 1 minute and make it global. Add the Transform block, which you will use to get the necessary data from candles, particularly the closing price. The Transform block is located under Tools, Logical. Set a connection between the Filter Candle block and Transform. After this, select Closing Price in the drop-down list. This is the value you'll be using to build the Moving Average EMA indicator. Now add the EMA indicator blocks and set the periods in their parameters, 30 for a slow indicator line and 10 for a fast one. Create a connection and enter these parameters. From the Tools Logical section, add Transform blocks for getting the last and next to last indicator value. Create a connection between the blocks. In the parameters, enter the corresponding indexes, 1 and 2, separated by commas. Then add two if blocks, which will check the values of a fast and slow moving average in the current step and in the previous step. Open the settings for the if block and click the button for comparing two input values in the block. The higher signal will be generated if a fast moving average crossed a slow one moving up. A lower signal will be generated if a fast moving average crossed a slow one moving down. Then add two ISIT blocks, which are located under Tools Logical and are called Data Validation. They will check that both of the above events occurred. In the current step, a slow-moving average is less than the fast one. And in the previous step, the slow-moving average was greater than the fast one. And vice versa. In the current step, the slow-moving average is greater than the fast one. And in the previous step, the slow-moving average was less than the fast one. Then generate signals by adding two Create Signal blocks from Tools Trading. For the first block, specify the turbo type and the call direction. For the second block, specify the turbo type and the put direction. The expiration time in both current blocks is immediate. Now combine these signals in a single branch. To do this, use the Union block located under Tools Logical called Data Integration. Then select the Money Management strategy. In this case, use Reinvestment of Profit. Add this block, which is located under Strategy, Standard Blocks, and is called Reinvestment of Profits. Set the value 3 in the block parameters. This parameter sets how many profitable transactions there must be in the reinvestment cycle in order for the cycle to start over. Add another block that lets the robot open positions only when the profit percentage for the asset is greater than a specific value, such as 80%. This block is located under Strategies, Filters, and is called Minimum Profit Percentage. In the block parameters, set the value to 80. And now, the final step for creating the robot. Add a block that will open a trade. It is located under Tools, Trading, and is called Open a Position. Now save the robot by clicking Save in the upper left corner. The next step is to test the robot on historical data. Let's test the robot on the Euro-US dollar pair for the last 24 hours. This result is more than acceptable, so you can save and launch the robot.
You